الله الرحمن الرحيم يا
with passage number 10. It goes as follows: O you who believe, seek help through patience and prayer. Surely Allah is with those who are patient. And that's found in Surah 2 verses 153. So you see here, the underlying theme is that the difficulty will pass over, and patience while turning to God will help an individual get through it. Passage at number 9 is, and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient who, when disaster strikes them, say, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return. Those are the ones upon whom are the blessings from their Lord and mercy. And it is those who are rightly guided. And you can find that in the Quran 2 verses 155 to 157. So when hearing of someone's passing, Muslims respond with quoting the above verse, saying, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return. So let's go now to the passage at number 8, and it goes as follows: Allah intends to provide ease for you and does not intend to create hardship. And that's in the Quran, Surah 2 verses 185. And one of the most important lessons that Muslims draw from this passage is that it basically reminds them that whatever the trial that they're facing, it's coming from Allah only to make them a better person and strengthen their trust in Him. Moving on now to the passage at number 7, and it goes as follows: it could be that you dislike something when it is good for you, and it could be that you like something when it is bad for you. Allah knows, and you do not know. And you can find that in the Quran, Surah 2 verses 216. So things like marriage, as well as admission to school or getting a job, can all go completely not as planned. And it's at this point that Muslims are expected to understand that this occurrence is from Allah. And even though you do not understand it or may not even like it, they're reminded that Allah knows best. The next passage at number 6 says, Allah does not charge a soul except with that within its capacity. And that's in Surah 2 verses 286. So again, Muslims use this as comfort that whatever you are going through, it's definitely a guarantee that you're gonna make it through, whatever it is. Halfway in, the passage at number 5 goes as follows: if Allah helps you, there is none to overcome you. And if He abandons you, then who is there to help you after that? In Allah, the believers should place their trust. And that passage is taken from Surah 3 verses 160 from the Quran. So as we can see here, Muslims are reminded that God is all true, and He's the best friend, and He's the only one that you can turn to for absolutely 100% reliable help. Then we move on now to the passage at number 4, and this is what it says: and He will provide him from sources he never could imagine, and whosoever puts his trust in Allah, then He will suffice him. Verily Allah will accomplish His purpose. Indeed, Allah has set a measure for all things. And that's taken from the Quran, Surah 65 verse 3. So this verse here highlights how for humans, that humans don't really know and cannot even fathom how Allah is going to take care of people and their affairs. But He's taking care of all of them nonetheless. Now the passage at number 3 says this: enough for me is Allah, there is no God but He. In Him I have placed my trust, and He is the Lord of the great throne. And you can find that in the Quran, Surah 9 verses 129. So people have used this verse to calm themselves down before important meetings, as well as appointments, or just for things that make them completely uncomfortable. We're getting down pretty close to the end. We have 2 more passages to look at. So let's look at passage number 2. So this says, when my servants ask you about me, then tell them that I am near. Very short passage found in the Quran, Surah 2 verses 186. And this reminds Muslims that Allah is very close to them, no matter what, at any time. And finally, the passage at number 1 goes as follows. Place your trust in Allah. Surely Allah loves those who place their trust in Him. And that's taken from Surah 3 verses 159. So you see, for Muslims, if placing your trust in Allah will result in Him loving you, then that's even more comfort than a Muslim can even ask for. Verse number 10 is Surah 4 verses 3, and it goes as follows. And if you fear that you will not deal justly with the orphan girls, then marry those that please you of other women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one or those your right hand possesses. This is more suitable that you may not incline to injustice. So many people have wondered, if men can marry several wives, then why can't women also marry several husbands? The verse at number 9 is Surah 4 verses 34. Men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other and what they spend for maintenance from their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them, then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand. So the debate about this passage is whether or not this is a physical striking of a woman or symbolic for being stern with them. Yeah, there's a whole lot of debate happening around this one. But moving on to number 8, we have Surah 5 verses 38. Although the Quran has many passages of peace and prosperity, this one has been pretty tough for many people to reconcile because it's a passage of harsh punishment and they're looking to reconcile it with the peaceful view of Islam. But either way, the passage goes as follows. As for the thief, the male and the female amputate their hands in recompense for what they committed as a deterrent punishment from Allah. And Allah is exalted in might and wise. Number 7 brings us to Surah 66 verses 9. Followers of other religions have used this passage frequently in their arguments against Islam, and it goes as follows. O Prophet, strive against the disbelievers and the hypocrites and be harsh upon them, and their refuge is hell, and wretched is the destination. Moving on now to Surah 33 verses 50. This verse is a big topic of debate among religious circles in regards to the validity of Muhammad being a prophet. We find mentions of slavery and intimate relations in the following passage. O Prophet, indeed we have made lawful to you your wives to whom you have given their due compensation, and those your right hand possesses from what Allah has returned to you of captives, and the daughters and your paternal uncles, and the daughters of your paternal aunts, and the daughters of your maternal uncles, and the daughters of your maternal aunts who emigrated with you, and a believing woman if she gives herself to the Prophet, and if the Prophet wishes to marry her, this is only for you, excluding the other believers. We certainly know what we have made obligatory upon them concerning their wives and those their right hands possess. But this is for you in order that there will be upon you no discomfort, and ever is Allah forgiving and merciful. Moving on now to number 5. This brings us to Surah 2 verses 65. And you had already known those who transgressed among you concerning the Sabbath, and we said to them, be apes, despised. Now, the belief around this is that these people who broke the Sabbath were turned into apes by God. Another verse in the Quran is used to make the point that they actually became literal apes rather than this being metaphorical. Surah 2 verses 117 says this: He is the one who has originated the heavens and the earth. And when he wills to originate a thing, he only says to it, be, and it becomes. So in the previous passage, we see be apes. So this is an argument used for this verse as to it meaning literal apes versus symbolic apes. Continuing with number 4, we have Surah 8 verses 12. Remember when your Lord inspired to the angels, I am with you, so strengthen those who have believed. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieved. So strike them upon the necks and strike from them every fingertip. And the argument that is often raised against this verse is that it goes against religious freedom. Continuing this episode at number 3, we have Surah 2 verses 282. This verse in a nutshell says that the witness testimony of one man is equivalent to the witness testimony of 2 women. O you who have believed, when you contract a debt for a specified term, write it down, and let a scribe write it between you in justice. Let no scribe refuse to write as Allah has taught him. So let him write, and let the one who has obligation dictate, and let him fear Allah, his Lord, and not leave anything out of it. But if the one who has the obligation is of limited understanding or weak or unable to dictate himself, then let his guardian dictate in justice, and bring to witness 2 witnesses from among your men. And if there are not 2 men available, then a man and 2 women from those whom you accept as witnesses, so that if the one of the women errs, then the other can remind her. And let not the witnesses refuse when they are called upon, and do not be too weary to write it, whether it is small or large, for its specified term. That is more just in the sight of Allah, and stronger as evidence, and more likely to prevent doubt between you, except when it is an immediate transaction which you conduct amongst yourself. For then there is no blame upon you if you do not write it, and take witnesses when you conclude a contract. Let no scribe be harmed or any witness. For if you do so, indeed, it is grave disobedience in you. And fear Allah, and Allah teaches you, and Allah is knowing of all things. Moving on now to number 2, we have this verse, Surah 4 verses 11. Allah instructs you concerning your children, for the male what is equal to the share of 2 females. But if there are only daughters, 2 or more, for them is 2/3 of one's estate. And if there is only one, for her is half. And for one's parents, to each one of them is 1/6 of his estate if he left children. But if he had no children, and the parents alone inherit from him, then for his mother is 1/3. And if he had brothers or sisters, for his mother is 1/6, after any bequests he may have made or debt. Your parents or your children, you know not which of them are nearest to you in benefit. These shares are an obligation imposed by Allah. Indeed, Allah is ever-knowing and wise. So what this verse described is that women inherit half of what a man inherits. And that's the bone of contention around this passage. And finally, we end this episode off at number 1, Surah 9 verses 29. Fight those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day, and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and his messengers have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of truth from those who were given the scripture. Fight until they give the jizya willingly while they are humbled. Now guys, the issue around this verse is that apparently it tells Muslims to fight non-Muslims because they believe something different than they do. So the first thing is the speed of light. Muslims believe that angels are created from light, and the angels communicate the affairs of God, which they get from what is known as a preserved tablet in outer space. And the speed at which they travel to and from this tablet, it turns out to actually be the speed of light. In the Quran, Surah 32 verse 5, it says, Allah rules the cosmic affairs from the heavens to the earth. Then this affair travels to him a distance in 1 day, at a measure of 1,000 years of what you count. Hence, in 1 day, the angels will travel a distance of 1,000 years according to the lunar calendar, because that's what Muslims counted at that time. The belief is that God is saying that the angels travel in 1 day the same distance that the moon travels in 12,000 lunar orbits. 12,000 lunar orbits or Earth days equals the speed of light. Now science shows that. Now the atmosphere protects us is the next thing. So the atmosphere protects Earth from radiation and meteorites. Now this is also portrayed in the Quran 1400 years ago. In the Quran, Surah 21 verse 32, it says, and we made the sky a protective shield, and they turn away from its sign. The next scientific miracle in the Quran is the female bees are the worker bees. So worker bees are actually all females. Now the Quran refers to bees that generate honey as females. So listen to this. In the Quran, Surah 16 verses 68 to 69, it says, and your Lord revealed to the bees, build your hives in mountains mountains, trees, and in what they build. Then eat from every fruit and follow your lord's enslaved paths. From its bellies exists drink of different color, in it healing for man. So in Arabic, the word eat or kuli is for females, and that's used in the Quran. And the term follow a path is the word usluki in Arabic, and that refers to females as well. As also the term its bellies is butuniha, and that's also used for females. The Quran also mentions hearing before seeing. So this is what I mean. So hearing is one of the first senses to develop. Now this is only known in recent history, and it's also mentioned in the Quran. The Quran, Surah 76 verses 2, it says, "We created man from a fertilizing sperm to test him, and we made him hearing and seeing." Also the Quran, Surah 23:78, it says, "It is he who produced for you the hearing and the eyesight and the feelings, but little gratitude you show." So the Quran always refers to the hearing before the seeing, which turned out to be the actual order of human development in the womb. Flight comes in at number 6. So the Quran is also believed by Muslims to have foretold that humans someday would be able to reach the sky. In Surah 29:22, it says, "You cannot escape Allah's might on earth or in the sky, and you have no protector and no savior besides Allah." Also in Surah 84:19, it says, "You will ride one layer from another layer." The word tabak in Arabic means layer in English, and from this came certain myths about flying carpets, but now the flying aircrafts that go up layer upon layer are what we know today. Also, sound waves. According to the University of Washington, the original sound waves were not temperature variations, but they were actual real sound waves spreading around the universe. Now in the Quran, Surah 41 verse 11 indicates this, and it says, "Then he directed himself to the heaven when it was smoke, and then said to it and to the earth, 'Come willingly or by force.' They said, 'We do come willingly.'" So the heaven replying back implies that the heaven had a voice, which would mean it emitted a sound wave. Another miracle Muslims point to is high altitudes affect your breathing. As altitude increases, atmospheric pressures and oxygen levels in the atmosphere actually decrease, which eventually gets to a point where we can no longer breathe. Now, we all know this. The higher you go, the harder it is to breathe. Now in the Quran, Surah 6 verse 125, it says this, "Those whom Allah wants to guide, he opens their chests to Islam, and those whom he wants to leave astray, he makes their chests tight and constricted, as if they are ascending to the sky." Bones forming before muscles is also another miracle. Apparently the first formation of actual bones happens in the jawbone at day 41, and about 3 days later, that's when the associated muscles are formed. And in the Quran, Surah 23 verse 14, it says, "Then we develop the semen into a leech, then we develop the leech into a lump, then we develop the lump into bones, then we clothe the bones with flesh, then we produce it into another creature. Most blessed is Allah, the best of creators." Number 2, now we look at the part of the brain responsible for lying. So for centuries, everybody thought that the frontal part of the human brain was responsible for sight, because of course it's at the front of your head. But we know now that the part responsible for vision is actually at the back of the brain. So if you fall back and hit the back of your head, it could affect your sight or make your eyes go cross-eyed. But now science shows us that the frontal part of our brain, or the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for forming intelligent thoughts like creating lies. And Muslims quote the Quran, Surah 96 verse 16, that says, "A lying, sinful forehead," which indicates that lying is happening in the front of your head. Now, number 1, we have planets, stars, and all of the celestial bodies are actually moving. For centuries, it was believed that the Earth was fixed, and the sun and the moon and other planets and the stars and all that revolved around the Earth. But an interesting passage from the Quran that the Muslims point to is Surah 39 verses 5, and it says, "Allah created the heavens and the earth in truth. He overlaps the night over the day and overlaps the day over the night, and enslaves the sun and the moon. All move to a pre-recorded destiny."